710 KURV, the pulse of Valley business, bringing you the latest headlines, expert insights, and real stories shaping the Rio Grande Valley's economy. From local innovation to global markets, we've got it covered. Stay informed, stay connected. Your go-to for everything business. The pulse of Valley business. News Talk 710 KURV, where knowledge meets opportunity. Broadcasting from the Valley's commercial and fleet headquarters studio at PayneAutoGroup.com. You're listening to News Talk 710 KURV.
I'm Sergio Sanchez, and I want to say thank you to our family at the Museum of South Texas History, Most History, and a dear friend who I admire, I love so much, Frank Guajardo. I've known Frank
otherwise
for years.
known as Francisco Guajardo.
I call him Frank. Everybody calls him Francisco. He's Frank Guajardo. Longtime educator, just one of the authors of the avant-garde approach to education, send our kids, our babies, to Ivy League schools and to colleges up northeast. That's part of his resume. He is the director of the Museum of South Texas History. Well, Frank, thanks for having us over. Thank you for pushing us over to San Antonio to do the VIVA Fresh EXPO, which is only 11 years old. I was surprised to know that it's only been about a decade, but it made a huge difference in bringing to market our goods, our fruits, our veggies, not only in the Valley, but also for all of Texas, like folks who sell nuts and things like that. It's a clearinghouse of Texas agriculture, fruits and veggies. It's the VIVA Fresh EXPO, and we're broadcasting in San Antonio. Right now, obviously, in this conversation, we're recording this conversation at the Museum of South Texas History, here on the square in Edinburgh. And Frank is going to give us a quick tour of the roots that make up what is today our ag industry in South Texas. And what better place to start than what provides, of course, the canals, the water. But first, I want to start where what you told me, what the Spaniards said about our portion of the new world that they discovered. They didn't think we could produce much down here. Let's start with that.
This is really the predicate for this whole thing. When the Spanish came in large numbers in the 1740s, 1750s. There were already Españoles here in Cadereyta, in certain places like Cerralvo. There were presidios there, going back to the 1500s. Yeah. Those tended to be communities led by men, so those communities did not propagate and they didn't create these permanent settlements, like presidios type. Yeah. But when Escandón comes in the 1748 and into the 1750s, Escandón comes as part of the great empresario, right? The colonizer of the northern edges of Nueva España. When Escandón comes and he brings about 400 plus families, that's when these communities gain root. They become permanent. Mier, Camargo, Revilla, Guerrero, Laredo, Reynosa. And part of what Escandón brings with him is scribes. And so these people who are writing about what they're seeing, they're documenting in a very extensive way. And a lot of these archivos are in Ciudad Victoria, la capital de Tamaulipas. They're in la Ciudad de México, and they are in Sevilla, a lot of these documents. And one of the common themes in the writings of the Spanish is that this is not a place for agriculture. It's a place for ranching. If you want to do agriculture, small-scale farming is fine, family farming is fine, but this is not a place for agriculture because of the scarcity of fresh water. Mm-hmm. They understood that the one freshwater source was the Rio Grande, the Rio Bravo they called it. So they left warnings. When we get into the colony of Nueva España into Mexico, 1821, Mexico becomes La República de México, and Mexico was kind of, they had a fetish with the French for some reason. And so Mexico imported a number of French intellectuals to help to build the institutions in Mexico. And one of the people they dispatched to Matamoros in the 1820s is a guy named Berlandier, a botanist. Berlandier was not only a botanist, but he was also an ethnographer, an anthropologist. He was a student of the flora and the fauna and the people, the culture, the climate, etc. Berlandier wrote extensively also, because he walked through here. Do not make agriculture this.
Well, it's a good thing they didn't listen to these.
Well, but Berlandier said there is this place between the Rio Grande and the Nueces. It would be very, very difficult to make it go as kind of a big agricultural, industry. And he also said small scale farming is fine. If you're close to the river is fine, but north of the river, he saw the challenges. And so Berlandier, just like the Spanish, were actually quite prescient. They could see into the future if you were to do this.
Water delivery, that was the issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to that, because
the game changers, Sergio, the game changers here are really two big products. Number one is the rise of irrigation, modern irrigation.
Yeah, the canal.
And so yes, it is. Okay. Well, first it's the advent of the centrifugal pump.
Oh, okay.
It's a fancy way of saying now through motors you can pump water out of sources, out of the river, right? Yeah. When John Klausner builds the pump house in 1896, and he's able to take unlimited water out of the Rio Grande to grow his crops, including sugarcane, that he would enter into the World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri, 1904, and he would win the gold medal.
Wow.
And everything changes there.
Wow.
Because, the big investors of the day are in St. Louis, Missouri, looking at what's the next big thing to invest in.
Yeah.
There was a fellow, this is kind of an interesting story, there was a fellow in the front row witnessing John Klausner win the contest for the best crop in the world. That fellow in the front row was a guy named Henry Farr, a big investor that would come within the next few years. So once you get irrigation, and then you have in 1904, coincidentally but not so coincidentally, Klausner wins the gold medal. 1904, boom, the railroad comes to South Texas. And then all bets are off about the wisdom of the French and the wisdom of the Spanish, and don't do agriculture because now you've got a scientific way to bring water out of the Rio Grande. What they're not thinking about, Sergio, is that in 30, 40 years, once you pump all this water out of the Rio Grande, you're not going to have water. And when you look today, in fact, I'm now jumping over a century.
Yeah.
South Texas continues to be one of the breadbaskets of this country. But it is Florida, South Texas, and California. The only one that's endangered is South Texas because of water.
Yeah.
Now we continue to be like the third ranked, in terms of production. We continue to be because very few places in this country have the intensity in scientific research about how to make agriculture more efficient. Mm-hmm. One of the great benefits in that context that South Texas has been able to gain is that we had for a long time a congressman who led the agriculture committee in Congress and brought a windfall of resources to South Texas to create this research center, to create that other lab, to create this kind of sprawl in terms of research and development for agriculture. So now we don't do irrigation like we used to. Mm-hmm. It's drip. Yeah. It's other kinds of efficient ways of doing it. If you look over here, Sergio, I'm going to show you this map here.
And I've got about 3 minutes or so left, so let's jump to a couple real quick.
Not biblical minutes, huh?
Okay, no. Not 1,000 years, I'm sorry.
When you look at this map, this is a map that really shows how the infrastructure was laid out in the early 1900s, the early 20th century. Uh-huh. You look at this map and you see the railroads. You look at this map and you see in the blue, you see the irrigation and canal system that was kind of elaborated early in the 1900s. So you have this intersection of roads and highways and railroads and canal and irrigation as this infrastructure. This is the way we were able to do it. This is the way, if you can just point over here, this is a historical photograph that's a lovely historical photograph that really points to how people did it. And so what this ecosystem did was it took advantage of a lot of Mexican labor that could come and dig the ditches, to create the irrigation and canal system.
We're looking at a picture, and this is for radio. We're looking at a picture here at the Museum of South Texas History of canals being dug. It's either horses or oxen.
Those are mules.
Mules that are being used to dig those ditches here in deep South Texas, to use the pumps to throw the water in there for an irrigation canal system. Back in the 1904
yes.
is this picture.
So first of all, you're clearly a city boy.
I don't have my glasses on.
Okay, it's the glasses. But part of what happens here, Sergio, in the early 1900s is that you have a confluence of two fantastic macro processes. Number one, the irrigation that I talked about, and also the advent of the railroad. But you also have the eruption in Mexico that's called the Mexican Revolution. Oh. And so a lot of Mexicans do not want to die, and so Mexicans come north of the river. And you have the ready labor force to be able to clear the brush, because this here was thorn forest. 95% of the entire landscape of South Texas was thorn forest. And so you need to clear it because the railroad's coming, and you have a new vision of modernity in agriculture, moving away from ranching.
You gave me a look at the original map where
Yes.
they're accessing, creating pumps into canals
Yes.
from the southern portion of Hidalgo County, Cameron County, into the land to irrigate some of the land, which would be the southernmost portion
Yes.
of the county, because the canal systems only go to a certain length. Give me 2 minutes,
Yes.
and show me something else here at the Museum of South Texas History. You got a packing shed over here. There's other.
Well, we're gonna go to
equipment,
the
so
packing shed
let's go
because
packing shed.
the packing sheds were built when the train depots popped up. So little towns in South Texas. In South Texas, we have railroad towns and steamboat towns. Steamboat towns of the 19th
Which
century.
is one of the exhibits here, right? You still got the steamboat on the second
we
floor?
have a full
I
replica
remember
of a
that
steamboat.
one. That's nice.
So we are moving into the, what in the South Texas vernacular, we call it una bodega, right? These packing sheds that you see all across South Texas, and you see them especially, those that still exist.
For radio, we got the conveyor belt that's full of oranges that are part of the packing sheds as they process the fruit
Yes.
for packing.
So the two citrus products that reign supreme here are grapefruits and oranges. And we have limes, and we have lemons, and we have kumquats, and we have other things, right? But the grapefruit and the orange have been the principal citrus crops. Now, when we had freezes in the 20th century, and the freezes really scared a lot of the citrus farmers out of citrus, because it takes 6-7 years to grow, an orange tree or a grapefruit tree, and then to bear fruit, right? So a lot of farmers say, "Whoa, we get this freeze, in year 3 of the growth of the tree." So a lot of farmers move from citrus towards seasonal crops, more vegetables, onions, and you have tomatoes, and you have jalapenos, and you have other kinds of crops that you don't need the 6-year investment of the tree. And so what we've seen is a shift in agricultural output from heavy in citrus, early 20th century, to now heavy into vegetables. So there's a little bit of a mix, but vegetables are the safer economic bet. And we are in the middle, Sergio, of una bodega, a packing shed, where this was a huge employer in South Texas for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I mean, we don't see as much of this anymore because we have much more efficient production processes for agriculture.
There it is, the full spectrum of what is grown here in deep South Texas, and the winter garden in other parts of Texas as well. But again, the focus here at the Museum of South Texas History is our history here in the Rio Grande Valley. And we want to thank Frank Guajardo, thank Sandy, thank all the family here at the museum for being part of the sponsorship group to have us over San Antonio at VIVA Fresh. It is the big expo that, again, we're taking our fruits and veggies, what our growers produced, and taking it to market. And it has made a difference. Viva Fresh has made a difference in the past 10 years in propelling our fruits and veggies to retailers up Northeast, Midwest, and restaurant groups, and all those things. I want to give you a quick minute or so. Anything you have on the calendar for May, for June, something you need to mention so folks can put it on their calendar. Come and join us for either fundraisers or events. What's going on at most history?
Well, what I would say to people is come to the museum so you can become sort of imbued in the stories. Right. I mean, look, a video just came on packing sheds. I think that if you live in the valley, or even if you don't live in the valley, and you want to understand yourself, and you want to understand what is brought to your
Yeah.
table to eat, for dinner or whatever, or para un postre, whatever, I think you have to look at the history that shapes you and shapes our economy, our culture, et cetera, et cetera. And for that, a museum is a great place to come to learn about yourself.
What you've seen here is just a crumb of what is available. I mentioned the steamboat exhibit that's on the second floor. The history of our region, the Museum of South Texas history goes back to like prehistory, where we had natives, where we had mammoths, right? You still got the mammoth somewhere?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's part of it. Bring your family to
Yes.
the Museum of South Texas History. Frank, thank you.
Sergio.
Frank Guajardo. He's the
Gracias.
director of the Museum of South Texas History.